And so it was.
The Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive, wasn't able to compete with the SNES in terms of power, and it definitely lacked the name recognition that Nintendo's new console had. Still, with its fast blue mascot, a bunch of great arcade ports, and a marketing approach aimed at the more mature gamer, the Genesis provided the Super Nintendo with the competition that it really needed. Of course, we all know that things didn't end well for Sega in the long run, but it was still one heck of a 16-bit system. Truth be told, I had a Sega Genesis before I had a Super Nintendo when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved the system. Just because the channel's called Loch Ness Monster doesn't mean that I don't have any love for the Jenny. Today we're going to take a look at what I feel are the 20 best Sega Genesis games. Now obviously I won't be able to cover every great game available for the system. If I missed a game that you feel deserved a spot on this list, let me know which and why down in the comments. Now let's turn on that blast processing and let's get started. Starting off our list with number 20, yeah, you're seeing this right, NHL 94. So, with the yearly release patterns and slightly annual upgrades, it's pretty uncommon for a sports game to land on a list of a console's top titles. But everything just fell into place perfectly for NHL 94. It's one of those rare sports games that truly endures the test of time. Sure, NHL 4 isn't packed with crazy features, but the gameplay on the ice strikes that perfect balance between realism and arcade-like speed, making every game feel distinct. In terms of presentation, the arena-specific organ tunes and goal horns are legendary. You could definitely argue that no other hockey game has really come close to the gameplay that NHL 94 offers. EA even chose to bring the game back for modern consoles in 2020, just confirms how exceptional this title really is. And let's start off the comments right away, guys. Who's your favorite NHL team? Any longtime viewer of the show knows I'm a fan of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Number 19, Quackshot, starring Donald Duck. If you check the dictionary, chances are under unlikely hero, yes I did the quotation marks, you'd see a picture of Donald Duck. Now, Donald is definitely more about getting mad at everything around him than actually saving the day. Still, he gives a solid shot in his first game, Quackshot, starring Donald Duck, which is one of the best out there. Following in his Uncle Scrooge McDuck's footsteps, Donald sets off on a treasure hunt with his nephews Huey, Louie, and Dewey, tagging along to help him out. The main villain in the game is Pete, who tries to thwart Donald at every opportunity. But with his trusty gun that fires plungers, bubblegum, and popcorn, Donald is determined to beat Pete to the Maharaja's treasure and snag the prize for himself. I can still vividly remember buying this game from Consumer Electronics when I was a kid and staring at the cover all the way home. Number 18, Vector Man. Ironically, we're almost kicking off our list with a game that was at the end of the Sega Genesis's run, with what many consider to be the console's final standout title. Now, by 1995, a lot of gamers had shifted their focus over to the Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Nintendo had just shown everyone that the SNES still had life in it with the groundbreaking graphics of Donkey Kong Country, and Sega was in dire need of one more hit. Their solution was Vector Man, an action platformer that utilized vector piece animation to bring the main character to life with 23 separate sprites instead of just one large sprite. If that sounds a bit gimmicky, that's because it was. Still, one could argue that the art style has held up better than most of the other 16-bit games, and Vector Man continues to be one of the more fun platformers on the Genesis, thanks to its impressive and diverse campaign. Number 17, Toe Jam and Earl. Even after all these years, categorizing Toe Jam and Earl is still a bit tricky. It's a mix of roguelike and platformer and an early forerunner to today's adventure games. And it's just an all-around hilarious, weird, and funky experience. It's definitely one of the more distinctive games on the Genesis, and it still holds up pretty well today thanks to its humor, an amazing soundtrack, and a cool co-op mode. Even though it got a lot of love from critics when it first came out, Toe Jam and Earl didn't sell as well as first hoped. There was a few more Jam and Earl games that came out later, but they just didn't manage to capture that magic and uniqueness of the original. As time passes, it becomes easier to see that this game was truly a special experiment. And for most people, when you think of a game not named Sonic, synonymous with the Sega Genesis, Jam and Earl is usually the answer. Number 16, Golden Axe. Before Sega jumped into the home console scene, they were all about making arcade cabinets, and one of their biggest hits was the side-scrolling hack-and-slash game Golden Axe. People loved it for its fun gameplay and addictive combat, plus there was a magic system that just really hit the spot. This acclaim carried over to the version on the Sega Genesis. Unlike many other arcade adaptations, Golden Axe didn't have to cut out a lot of the original flair or features. The Genesis version looked and sounded just as sharp as the arcade classic, and it even included an extra level and boss that you couldn't find in the arcade. This seamless transition from arcade to console really showcased that Sega was doing what Nintendo couldn't. Nintendo. Number 15, Ghouls and Ghosts. The game definitely offers a tough challenge, and after finishing it, you'll need to replay all the levels again, which some might find frustrating, while other crazy hardcores are definitely going to enjoy. The G&G series is well known for its difficulty, and the Genesis version stays true to that aspect. You take control of Arthur once again trying to save your lady love. You can acquire different armor this time around that has unique effects on your weapon. This game is still one of the top Genesis platformers and is definitely worth a look, even if you've already tried the Super Nintendo or NES or arcade versions. Side note, I've had several people tell me that they actually prefer the Genesis soundtrack to the SNES version. What do you think? Number 14, Earthworm Jim. Now, Playmates Toys wanted their own exceptional superhero, and that's how Earthworm Jim came to be. This game is a side-scrolling platformer where you take control of the main character, who, as his name suggests, is an earthworm named Jim. Of course, he's not just any earthworm, he's got a super-powered alien suit and a massive gun. What makes Earthworm Jim stand out from the other games and toys is his unique presentation. The art style is cartoonish with a touch of comic book grunge, and every level and asset is packed with cheeky senses of humor. One of the first things you get to do in the game is launch a cow. Why? Why not? Earthworm Jim was super iconic in the 90s, and I just wish that he had a little bit more staying power. Number 13, Contra Hardcore. Every console has to have a legendary run-and-gun game, and Contra Hardcore definitely takes that role for the Sega Genesis. Now, you might recognize this as Probotector over in Europe, and the spin-off game from the Contra series has become a timeless classic that gamers still enjoy today. You take on the role of a task force known as the Hardcore, featuring 4 awesome soldiers who have taken over the original Contra Heroes spots from earlier games. Your mission is to take down the evil Colonel and his band of terrorists, while also retrieving the alien cell he intends to use to enhance his weaponry. The idea is straightforward. Blast everything in your path until it's gone as you navigate through each level. It's an ideal side-scrolling adventure with neat features that let you walk on certain walls and choose different routes based on the decisions you made in the game. Number 12, The Revenge of Shinobi. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, Sega was really hitting its stride, and The Revenge of Shinobi is a game that came out when the company was firing on all cylinders. This sequel to Sega's super popular 1987 arcade game definitely earns its classic status, featuring stunning early 16-bit graphics and a soundtrack by Yuzo Koshiro that gives it a signature Sega flair. If you've enjoyed this game before, you probably have it in your Genesis collection, but if you haven't played it before, you're in for a fantastic experience. There are other Shinobi games for the console, but in my opinion, this is the best of them. Number 11, Beyond Oasis. Launched toward the end of the Genesis's lifespan, just missing out on our top 10, Beyond Oasis got a bit lost in the excitement surrounding the upcoming consoles. Plus, since it was a new IP and had a strong resemblance to The Legend of Zelda, it probably didn't do itself any favors. While expectations weren't sky high, those who decided to give it a shot discovered that it was more than just another Zelda clone. Beyond Oasis boasts some of the finest sprites and animation on the Genesis, along with a wide range of combat options that really showcase the game's amazing collection of weapons and magic. It's truly a hidden gem that's definitely worth exploring now, especially if you were too young at the time or one of the people who just overlooked it when it first came out. Number 10, Crusader of Centi. So, keeping with the Zelda clone theme, if you're gonna make one, you might as well make it a great one. That's exactly what Atlas accomplished with Crusader of Centi, which is called Soleil in Europe. Soleil is the French word for sun. It's an action-adventure game that proudly displays its influences on its sleeve. For Genesis owners who were jealous of Link's adventures, Corona's Quest was a visually appealing alternative that definitely fit the bill. Basically, the story centers around the player character, who's a boy who just turned 14 years of age and must inherit his late father's sword to fight the monsters that threaten the human race's existence. To be fair, it isn't anything Zelda players haven't seen before, except for the Sonic the Hedgehog cameo. Number 9, Street Fighter II SCE. Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition was quite an impressive feat given the hardware that it was made for. It's more of an interesting side note in the Street Fighting series. Even though the game has the Champion Edition label, it actually features enhancements from the arcade Hyper Fighting version, which was later adapted for the SNES as Street Fighter II Turbo. The group battle feature is awesome, and having both the Champion Edition and Hyper Fighting versions is a very nice touch. I do have to say, honestly, you really need the 6-button Genesis controller to enjoy this properly. Switching between punch and kick by hitting start is just as bad as it sounds, but this is still a fantastic fighter for the console and one of the best ways to play it back in the day. And of course, being able to play as the boss characters was so cool at the time. Call me crazy, but this is one of my recommended must-own games for this system. Number 8, Ryar. Ryar was originally set to be Sega's mascot, a star with arms and legs going around against Nintendo's mustachioed character. You'd think that would fly, but it didn't, and Sonic became the face of the brand ever since. But don't write off Ryar just because of a botched marketing effort. The game is fantastic from beginning to end and feels a bit like Sonic actually. You can tell this game was made to compete with Nintendo's adorable lineup since the main villain's name is Greedy. Not exactly a name that sends chills down your spine. Ryar has to take down the wicked Greedy and rescue the trapped inhabitants across the solar system, stretching his arms out like Delsum, grabbing his foes, headbutting them with his shiny head, and you get the idea. Have fun being a superstar. Number 7, Phantasy Star 4. Phantasy Star 4 marked the final chapter of the original 16-bit series, providing a substantial and quite engaging RPG experience, even now. As you may have guessed, you wander through the world, interact with its inhabitants, level up, and participate in turn-based combat, much like other beloved games of that ilk. It's cherished for its stunning graphics and overall quality, and you don't necessarily have to have played the earlier games to appreciate the storyline, which makes it a great pick for anyone looking for some classic retro RPG fun. And I'm not a huge classic RPG guy, so ranking this so high in the top 10 should speak to its quality. Number 6, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The original Sonic game was and is awesome. It's probably the title that kept the Genesis going strong after a rough start, but honestly, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is just a better game. With new features like the spin dash and teaming up with Tails to zoom through levels, the game really shook up what was still a new Sonic formula and set a benchmark that the series has been trying to reach ever since. Plus, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has some of the absolute best levels and music in the franchise. You could argue that it's got some of the best music ever. The Sonic series has seen its fair share of highs and lows over the years, but revisiting Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is always a fantastic reminder of how amazing these games and the Genesis can be when they're at their best. Number 5, my personal favorite Sega Genesis game, Streets of Rage 2. Beat-em-ups were everywhere in the early 90s, yet even in such a packed genre, Streets of Rage 2 really stood out from the rest. A big part of what makes the game so great is Sega's deep understanding of the Genesis's hardware by 1992. The development team knew exactly every bit of power and how to get it from the console, leading to some of the largest and most vibrant sprites of that era. They even pulled off one of the best soundtracks of the decade using the Genesis or Mega Drive's not-so-great sound chip. Aside from the bright visuals, Streets of Rage 2 just felt smoother to play than any other beat-em-up. Even today, Streets of Rage 2 is one of the best games you could put in your Genesis or your Mega Drive. My favorite character was Skate, hands down. Who was yours? Number 4. You mean number 1? No, number 4, Gunstar Heroes. Originally, Sega wasn't interested in letting the newly formed Treasure team create a game for the Genesis, and the project nearly missed out on a North American release date even after it was finally given the green light. But against all odds, Gunstar Heroes eventually made its way to shelves worldwide. Today, it's rightfully celebrated as one of the best action games ever. Sure, the game draws a lot of inspiration from run-and-gun shooters, but Gunstar Heroes just does it better. It's faster, maybe even too fast in some parts, and Gunstar Red and Gunstar Blue have a ton of acrobatic moves at their fingertips, letting them slide and grab enemies as they navigate through the game's 7 epic levels. It might not be the longest game out there, but it's an absolute joy to replay every single time you flick that power switch to on. Number 3, Castlevania Bloodlines. Bloodlines was the final Castlevania game that Konami put out before the series fully embraced the Metroidvania style with Symphony of the Night. As you dive into the game, it quickly becomes clear that Konami was a bit uncertain about where to take the franchise next. Neither of the two characters you play as are named Belmont, and rather than being set entirely in Dracula's castle, Bloodlines features 6 expansive levels spread across Europe. While the gameplay is definitely rooted in the earlier Castlevania titles, it's noticeably quicker than its predecessors. Typically, a game with such an identity crisis would spell trouble. However, with Bloodlines, almost every alteration and fresh concept not only succeeds, but does so even more impressively, leaving you wishing that there was more Castlevania games like this one. As it stands, this game is one of the most distinctive and enjoyable entries in the entire franchise. Number 2, Rocket Knight Adventures. Konami really seemed to have a talent for making amazing games. The main character, Sparkster, is an armored opossum who swings a sword and can zoom around with a jetpack. Sparkster finds himself in some tough battles against pigs and robot foes. Even though the game comes from the same creators as Hardcore's, the style is way more cartoonish and easier on the eyes. The graphics are pretty slick too, with Sparkster navigating through a bunch of beautiful landscapes that remind you kind of like the Mushroom Kingdom or Emerald Zone. If Sonic is Sega's top animal mascot, then Sparkster might just be their second most beloved furry character, who also wears a lot of blue. The game never gets boring, and some levels really keep you on your toes. I was a bit apprehensive putting it at number 2, but then I played through it again, and after a few levels I remembered just how great of a game it was, and still is. Number 1, Sonic 3, or Sonic & Knuckles. Sure, it's technically 2 separate games, but Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were actually meant to be one huge Sonic adventure. Thanks to the groundbreaking lock-on technology, you can play them together even though they were released nearly a year apart. There's just so much memorable content packed in here, from Robotnik igniting Angel Island in the opening level of Sonic 3 and introducing Knuckles right up to the final battle with the Eggman. Plus, it featured some of the best music in the series, largely thanks to MJ's involvement. And when you combine the 2 games, you can tackle any level as Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles, which even changes the layout of some levels, allowing certain areas to be accessed only by specific characters. The sheer amount of content in Sega 3 and Knuckles is unmatched for any platformer of that time, whether on the Genesis or the Super Nintendo. This is the ultimate experience on the Genesis, and even today, it might just be the best Sonic game ever created. And that's my list of the 20 best Sega Genesis games. If you made it this far, you are awesome. Your view and your time are very much appreciated. Now, like I stated at the beginning of the video, I can't mention every great game in a top 20, and if everyone's top 10 or 20 list was the same, it would get pretty boring watching them all the time. So if there was a game out there that you feel that should have been mentioned, put it down in the comments. I can think of another 4 or 5 games right off the top of my head that could make this list right now. Until next time, you know what I'm gonna say, get up and stretch your back, and thanks again for watching and supporting the channel. I'll see you in a few weeks. Take care. Later.